Hello, and welcome to Creative Intelligence. I'm your host, Kartik Hosanagar. I'm a professor of technology and digital business at the Wharton School, where I also co-direct our center, Wharton Human AI Research Initiative. I'm also an entrepreneur, having started multiple tech startups. On this show, we explore the future of AI, creativity, and human potential. And for today's episode, I'm interested in exploring how companies are reimagining their visions around AI. There are many questions that come up. How do we play defense around AI? How do we play offense with AI? And these questions are just as applicable to individuals at the workplace as they are to organizations and organization leaders. How do we play defense and offense around AI as a new productivity platform as employees at the workplace? So these are questions I'd like to explore, and there's no better guest that I can think of than my friend Shishir Mehrotra. Shishir is the CEO, newish CEO of Grammarly, and prior to that, he was founder and CEO of business productivity platform Coda, which was in fact acquired by Grammarly. And before Coda, he was head of product and engineering at YouTube. Shishir, welcome to Creative Intelligence.
Thanks, Kartik. Great to see you again.
Great to see you, Shishir. So where I want to start off our conversation, Shishir, is your acquisition, Coda being acquired by Grammarly. And since joining Grammarly, you've been busy reinventing what Grammarly's future looks like, what the new vision is going to be, especially in an AI agentic era. But I want to actually rewind back maybe just a couple years ago when a lot of people, soon after the launch of ChatGPT, were worried that ChatGPT might be the Grammarly killer, and that ultimately platforms like, LLMs in general, but like ChatGPT, would render Grammarly, sort of not relevant anymore in the business landscape. My question for you is, what did you see as the opportunity when you took on the role as Grammarly's new CEO?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I definitely think the impact of ChatGPT on Grammarly and how we think about it really inspired where we're headed. It did have much less effect than we thought, or than the team thought that it would. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but I think the biggest is that Grammarly is somewhat misunderstood technology. And even when I started the conversation between Coda and Grammarly, I would say I learned a lot in that process that was somewhat surprising. I mean, at a high level, Grammarly is quite a sizable business. Actually, many people underestimate the size and impact of the business. We have 40 million daily active users on the product. Generates over $700 million a year in revenue. It's a very sizable business. But the way we look at it is we think of Grammarly as the OG AI agent. Like before anybody knew AI agent was a term, that was Grammarly. We've been doing it for 16 years now. And the thing that people misunderstand about it is they think that the product is mostly about grammar. And that's not a odd presumption given the name.
It's in the brand name.
We're working on the rebranding of the company. I can talk more about that later if you like. But that's what people think the product and the company is all about. But it actually turns out that what most of our time is spent on isn't really grammar specific. It's about how to bring AI seamlessly to end users where they actually work. And the base thing we do at Grammarly is Grammarly works with about 500,000 websites, applications, desktop applications, mobile applications, on wherever you work. Anything from Word and Google Docs to Slack and Teams to Apple Notes to whatever you might be doing, Grammarly can read what's on your screen, annotate it in a way that is unobtrusive to the application, and then make changes and edits on your behalf. So we refer to this technology as the AI Superhighway. We bring AI right to where you're already working. And one of the analogies that we thought a lot about is in that world of an AI superhighway, we're currently only running one car on that highway. That's the one with your high school English grammar teacher in it. And so interestingly, first off in your question, why has Grammarly seen less impact from ChatGPT than people expected is because people misunderstood that Grammarly is about grammar instead of Grammarly is about bringing AI where you work. ChatGPT, at least for now, is mostly about a different destination. It's a very useful destination, but a different place to go. And so, for the most part, Grammarly continues working where you're working, and people are still working where they work. It also leads to the opportunity ahead, which is we're going to open up the platform such that the AI superhighway from Grammarly becomes a place where any AI agent can work. And we have a set of them coming very soon. We'll be launching a few in the next couple months, and then we'll broadly open up the platform. And the scenarios that come out of that are can be very different. Today, if you're sitting in, for example, you're writing a customer memo, you can think of Grammarly as one agent sitting on your shoulder that's helping you with making sure you're grammatically correct, making sure check your tone and voice, and so on. But you also may have another agent that says knows everything in your sales information and says maybe mundane things like, hey, you've misspelled this customer's name, or maybe really important things like actually the bigger opportunity at this customer is in this other department. And maybe you have a support agent that says, hey, this person you're writing, they actually had a big issue last week. You should make sure to mention that in your email. And maybe you have a product marketing agent that says the thing that the customer is asking about is a feature that's launching next week, and here's how we positioned it, and here's the white paper you need to include, and so on and so on. And you can imagine this feeling of everywhere I work, I bring this army of agents with me. So anyways, that's how we think of Grammarly. It's really more about bringing AI to where people work than about grammar.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And I'll confess that I probably belong to that group where I associated Grammarly as, okay, this is for grammar. When you're writing, I want help to make corrections, get edits, suggestions, and things like that. So I can see how Grammarly is much more. And I, in fact, quite like the vision that you just shared, which is of this, I think you called it the AI superhighway, where one car is Grammarly, and now Coda is another car in there. You've just acquired Superhuman. That's potentially a third car. Walk me through specifically how Coda and Grammarly come together, or how Superhuman comes together with the two of them.
Yeah, so I would think about that a little bit differently. So the Coda relationship here has two parts. So with Coda, we actually there's two products in Coda. One is the product we're most known for is Coda Docs. That's the all-in-one work surface. I'll say more about that in a second. Coda, we'd also been working on a new product we call Coda Brain, which is a platform for AI agents as well. And it was built off of for listeners who are familiar with Coda. There's the one of the most popular features of Coda is called Packs. So these are that's the integration platform in Coda. There's now I think 8 or 9,000 of them. It's very easy to build them. They connect Coda to everything from Salesforce to Slack to Gmail to so on. And you can think of them as the early version in Coda terms of agents as well. They're much more knowledge-centered agents, so they're more about bringing context and knowledge directly to users. So the way Coda fits is we're taking that product, Coda Brain, and turning them into the first set of agents and the platform for building more agents. So that's what's happening in Coda Brain. The other side of what we're doing is, if I step back, broadly speaking, my goal is to build the AI native productivity suite. I think there's an opportunity to reinvent how productivity works for every individual and team in the world. As part of that, we're building a set of agents and a set of applications. So one side is agents. That's how we think about Grammarly, this AI superhighway, agents that work everywhere. But we're also building out the suite of applications for agents to work in. One way to think about that is, to pick a second analogy, is that you can think about Grammarly somewhat like a moat without a castle. And so it works everywhere, but it actually lacked that core destination, that core place where you work. To give an analogy from my old one of my old companies, if you imagine if YouTube only had YouTube embeds and didn't have YouTube.com. YouTube embeds are incredibly popular. They drive a lot of traffic. They drive a lot of usage, but actually a lot of the work happens in YouTube.com. So it turns out to be not exactly true. So Grammarly has an editor, the Grammarly editor, which is not what we're well known for, but actually drives a huge portion of our usage, upgrades, and so on, because there's different things you can do in a first-party surface than in a third-party surface. And so the Grammarly team before the Coda acquisition was in the middle of rebuilding that editor to be a modern editor that kind of fits with the world of modern editors, the way we think about products like Coda and Google Docs and Quip and Notion and so on. Um, and then that way we think of Coda as the writing home for all of these agents. Now, similarly, we started looking at the rest of the surfaces where people work, and in many cases, we're gonna bring agents to where other people already work. But in some cases, we think there's an opportunity to do something dramatically different in there by reinventing that surface as well. So with Coda, you'll see soon that Coda is being reinvented to be what I think is an agent-first writing experience. But the other opportunity we saw was in the communications tools. And so if you think about what teams do most of the time, you can almost divide time in half. The time you spend in the classic productivity tools, documents, spreadsheets, presentations, so on, and the time you spent in the communication tools. And that tends to be things like email and messaging. And this shows up actually directly in the Grammarly stats. So email in particular turns out to be the number one use case for Grammarly. It represents something like 3 out of our top 10 surfaces we work in. Grammarly currently helps people revise and send something like 15 million emails per week. And it's become one of the primary ways that people use Grammarly, the sort of existing grammar agent. And so as we went and looked for which other parts of the suite we want, we're building our Superhighway, bring AI everywhere. Grammarly's an agent. What we're doing with the agents in Coda, the packs, turning that into a set of agents. And then we're building a set of surfaces. We decided we would start building out the suite of surfaces, moving from document spreadsheets and presentations with the Coda surface into the email surface. And we ended up looking at that landscape. And that landscape is interesting. In the email landscape, it's a category I've been following for a long time. Actually, I don't know if you start. You didn't go all the way back to the beginning of my background, but my very first professional job was I was a developer on the Microsoft Outlook team in the 1990s. So
I remember back in the day, actually, my wife and you were colleagues at
That's
Microsoft
right.
back in the
That's
day.
right. So I ended up working with Prasanna at Microsoft after that as well. And email is a surface that actually, at the time, Outlook was the hottest surface. And then in the mid to 2000, 2005, 2006, Gmail came out, and that became the new surface. And here we are 20 years later, and there hasn't been another major invention. And so when we went looking at that category, there's only one real product that has reinvented email anywhere close to what Coda has done with documents and so on, and that was Superhuman. And so I ended up spending a lot of time with Rahul Vohra, the CEO there. And learning more about the business, and we built a joint plan of what an agentic email surface would look like. And they're already making a lot of progress on it, but there's a lot more coming there. But that's what we're doing.
Got it. Well, you talked about how email has evolved or what it looked like back when you were at Microsoft, say 25 years ago, what it looks like today, especially with Superhuman and what it could be like. I'd love to do a similar exploration of more broadly agents and productivity, meaning you talked about your vision of bringing agents to all relevant surfaces for, say, worker productivity. If we rewind back, again, 25, 30 years ago, what Microsoft Office did with Word and Excel, they were revolutionary, especially if you look at in hindsight, what they did where they made it faster, easier to edit documents that were previously handwritten or typed, and also enabled collaboration among people in an organization. Where do you think agents will take us, or what's your vision for what things could look like in 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just described is a good way to think about it. I think about the wave of productivity in 3 major eras. So the first one, as you described, was digitization. So that's when Word, Excel. I mean, actually, it started with WordStar, Harvard Graphics, and VisiCalc. Those are the first 3, the sort of progenitors of all the productivity tools we look at. And all of them were built with a physical metaphor. They were all built with, WordStar was built around taking a typewriter and, really building a digital typewriter. And Harvard Graphics was the professor's slides and so on. And that was all about, and a lot of value in moving from physical to digital. I would argue that the Google Docs generation that came in that same Gmail period, the 2005-2006 period, that there was a wave of tools that came out then and within the next 5 years after that that were focused on the second wave of productivity, which I think is about collaboration.
Mm.
Now most of them were known for being web-based tools, but that led to the idea of moving from working, in my mind, working by yourself to working with others. And this is, not only Google Docs. I'd put Slack in the same category. And one of the hallmarks of all these tools was that you knew you were in a generation two productivity tool because you saw avatars of people you were working with. Like
Yeah.
you could see your teammates working alongside you. You saw their cursor and so on. And that led to products like Figma and many others that look like that today. We've sort of taken it for granted, not even in just classic productivity tools, but many other tools that we work on this together.
Right.
I think the third phase that's coming now is the agentic phase. And I think the easiest way to think about it is we're going to take that list of avatars and we're going to dramatically expand it. Instead of the 5 teammates you work with being the only ones in that list, we'll also have the 50 agents that work alongside you as virtual collaborators doing different parts of the job on your behalf. And I think we're seeing this across many tools. And it's a big change as it shows up in all these different products of what I used to be able to discuss, assign, collaborate with a human, I can now do with an agent. So that's our view of what's coming next with software. So I find that to be the easiest mental picture.
Hmm.
Is just pretend your Google Doc, instead of having 5 avatars on it, had 50.
Yeah, makes sense. How do you see the user interface changing as you think about that? And I ask because in what you just described, it sounds like I'm working, and instead of the human avatars only seeing them, I'm also seeing the AI agent avatars, and they are doing their bit. But there's also another vision where all of that work, spreadsheets, docs, agents are doing their bit, and it's not clear in some of those other visions where's the human in this whole loop. So how do you think about human role, especially with agents coming into all these different surfaces?
It's interesting. I maybe have a slightly different view than some folks on this because I'll admit I have a very positive bias for how to think about the role of humans in AI.
Okay.
Um, Maybe to start with a different analogy, my older daughter is a rising sophomore in college. She's at Princeton, and she's been debating whether to go the math route or the CS route, and so she's um, picking between her majors, and she asked me, should I? She sort of said, "Why should I bother with CS? It seems like there's all these coding tools. They write all the code for you. What's the role of the human?" And it's sort of a
Right.
version of that discussion
Yeah.
happening in basically every discipline. And the analogy I gave her was I actually think what'll happen there is we're going to feel like employees start their workplace journey as managers. And
Hmm.
if you use that analogy, you say it's not really about the developer, the coding tool replacing the developer. It's more like imagine you showed up and your very first job as an engineer, you actually had a team of 50 people that work for you. And
Right.
these 50 people are actually quite interesting. They're very knowledgeable, they're very skilled, they work 24 hours a day, they've read every part of your code base and so on. But they also are very instructive. In fact, they never fight with each other. They never fight with you.
Yeah.
They sort of do what's asked. And your job is to commandeer this group into into a productive workplace. And so from that perspective, I think that the skill that humans are going to need more of in this future is, if management skill wasn't already a key part of being an employee, it's about to become a much bigger part. And so from that perspective, I think every tool, your coding tools, your productivity tools, so on, they have to change how they scale. And
Yeah.
and I think that's really interesting. I mean, maybe to give a different example outside of coding, I spent a lot of time with the team at Figma, and we talked a lot about what's the future of design. And I think we've gotten very used to the idea that design is a sort of back and forth between a product manager and a designer, and the designer comes back with 3 mocks and shows it to you, and all of a sudden it's going to become really easy to generate not just 300 or 3,000 different ideas for what you can do.
Yeah.
And now the problem is less of, hey, can you go off for a week and come up with something that maybe looks a little bit different in this way, and maybe change the colors or change the flow or so on. You can generate all of those right away. And now the job becomes organizing those, creating judgment, finding the right path to get those out to market, and so on. I think that's really exciting. And by the way, I don't think this is the first time that's happened. Maybe to pick a different category, if you think about advertising, so this is a category I spent a lot of time in, especially in my time at YouTube. There was a wave at the advertising world where if you go back to if you ever watched the show Mad Men, in those days, they small boutique ad firm, they would make one ad for the entire year, sometimes for the whole decade, and there was lots and lots of work on it. And then products like the Google products came out, and the YouTube ad products, and so on. And all of a sudden, it became very feasible to run not just one ad, run hundreds, thousands, millions of ads. And it completely changed the dynamic. And there was a view of this going to be the death of the meaningful ad agency, of the insightful advertiser, and so on. And of course, that's not what happened. I mean, what happened is these just became tools. Now you can reach people exactly how you want to reach them. Every ad can be a little bit different, and so on. And I think in that analogy, we're about to see the same thing happen to every job, every part of productivity, is the ability to create this army of people working with you, allows you to, on one side, scale much, much broader, but then puts a lot of pressure on these leaders as managers very early in their careers. So that's what I think will happen.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. Certainly, it's a positive analogy which keeps human agency going, but I also feel like it's actionable in a few different ways. One way that is potentially actionable is you're talking about like having this army or a team of 50 agents that you're going to work with. And I know it's very early days for agents, and so it's hard to talk about what are those 50 agents. But I'm curious, as someone who spends a lot of time in the productivity space, agent space, what is that one or couple tools or agents that you would recommend our listeners look at in terms of trying to, everyone's thinking about how do I retool, how do I reskill myself, what should I add to my arsenal, and so on. And of course, we'll set aside, you're going to say Grammarly is great, Superhuman is great. So that, I invited you, I think they're great as well. So let's set those aside and let's talk about,
And you're asking about things today, or you want to know what's coming around the bend?
Let's talk about both. Let's talk about things today because it's actionable and our listeners could say, hey, let me look at that tool and let me see what it can do for my work. And then also prepare them for what's coming in a year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'll pick a few different examples. I mean, I think if I look at, and maybe I should also say, the term agent and even the term AI, I think implies a seriousness and a distinctiveness of tools that many people, for some people it's very exciting, for some people it's jarring. Like whenever I bring it up with my wife, she says, "What's an agent? Like why would you want to talk about that?" And I describe Grammarly, and she says, "Yeah, but I would never call that an agent." And so, right. Is that a useful term? And actually, maybe it's a little bit of a side thought, but I remember when I was in college. So I arrived at MIT in the 90s, and my first research offer was to go work in the AI lab at MIT, famous AI lab at MIT. And I called my father. My father's a CS professor. And I said, "What do you think? Should I take this role in the AI lab?" And he said, "Why would you go work in the AI lab?" And this was in the 1990s. Right. He said, "Why would you work in the AI lab?" And I said, "Why? What's wrong with the AI lab?" And he says, "Don't you know AI is all the things that don't work?" and it was this interesting definition of the moment it works, we take it for granted. It works its way into our normal lives, and we no longer call it AI. And he said there's this enormous adverse selection of the things that sit in the AI lab are all the things that don't work yet. And so why would you want to go work at the things that don't work yet?
That is so true.
And of course, over the years, I've watched that term go from being, it sort of oscillated. For a period, it was like that. It was the things that didn't work. And then all of a sudden, especially when I was at YouTube, AI became a term for everything. Like everything was AI. And then I think when Transformers came out, and then you saw LLMs and ChatGPT and so on, I think we rotated, and nowadays AI speaks for generative AI only.
Yep. Yep.
And so we've kind of narrowed it because that's the one part of AI we feel like is right on the cusp of working, and we take all other AI for granted. I mean, if I my one point at YouTube, we didn't use the term AI until the term came in vogue. We sometimes called it machine learning. You sometimes
Sure.
called it reinforcement learning. Sometimes you just called it neural networks. But it was a technical thing that we
Yeah.
that we did. Um, and at one point we did the math, and we were running something like 200 independent AI systems at YouTube. And there's the obvious ones people know. This is like the search and recommendation systems and so on. But you also, when you upload a video, we picked out 3 thumbnails for you from that video. That was
Yeah.
all AI. And
Right.
all of these things I think today wouldn't be defined as AI. And the reason I mention that is many of the best AI tools won't. I'll mention a few that I think are on that edge of magic and not yet taken for granted. But I think many of them, and like we look at the rankings of AI tools, and when Grammarly is included, we tend to be the number 2 or number 3 most used AI tool in the world. But sometimes people don't include us because they take it for granted. This is a tool we already know, we understand how it works. So that's just a frame on it. In terms of tools today that I'm quite excited about beyond our own, of course, the tools in Grammarly, Coda, and Superhuman all have fantastic AI tools, and highly recommend taking a look at it. The one I've probably been playing with the most that has surprised me is Claude Code. Um, and I will recommend. We did a session of a few months back where we onboarded a set of non-technical leaders to Claude Code, and it is a little bit of a scary setup. And so, but the once you get past that setup, I would recommend even for people who are not very technical to give it a try.
Okay.
And you'll see, open it up and ask it to build something for you, and be ambitious. Ask it to build anything you want, and it is quite incredible what it's able to do. And it's definitely in my dad's definition of AI. It's on that edge of magic to a point of like it doesn't work 100%, but it's so amazing, and you can kind of finish the job, especially if you're a developer. You can finish the job, that it'll give a real tease of that future, and I think that's really exciting. If I jump a step forward, maybe some agents that I think are more relatable to the broader group, and maybe I'll pick one in the education space. I'll give you a couple examples actually. So one is I was talking to the team at Duolingo. So this is one of my favorite examples. Duolingo is one of my favorite products, and talking to them and said what mentioned this AI superhighway, and here's what we're planning to do, and they said, okay, so what's a Duolingo agent look like? And I don't know if they'll end up building this or not. I'm hoping to convince them to build it on our platform, but we'll see. But anyways, the use cases we came up with were really awesome. And one was, so imagine you have this Duolingo agent. What's the difference between a Duolingo agent and a Duolingo application? So imagine first that this agent could follow you everywhere you went. And the first thing it does is just watches you. And so say you're learning Spanish. Imagine that you could get credit for learning Spanish just by reading and writing in Spanish. So you don't have to go to the app. Hey, today you wrote an entire document in Spanish. That counts for your day. Your streak is still alive.
Yeah.
Now, second, imagine that agent wasn't just watching, but could actually interact with you and could do things in your surface. So imagine it came through and say you're reading something in Spanish and it knows your reading level, and it goes through and it just translates the words you don't know into English so that you can continue to read in Spanish for the most part, and you can up your game as you go. Or maybe the other way around, you're reading in English and it wants to quiz you, and it goes and takes the words you should know and it turns them into Spanish.
Yeah.
And that way you learn as you go. And then finally, third, imagine this agent remembers something about you so that when you come back to the Duolingo application, it says, hey, today, instead of giving you a lesson on how to order food at a restaurant, I'm going to give you a lesson on how to give an interview in a podcast, or how to hire a recruiter, or whatever you actually happen to be working on today. And in that way, I think this idea that we went from a world, we talked about productivity, going from digitization to collaboration to agentification. I think every application is going through this phase. And we went, what did mobile and cloud allow us to do? It allowed us to take applications that were for a very small group of people, and not only bring them to a much broader group, that's what SAS did, but also put them in our pocket. That's what mobile did, right? And that was a big phase of Duolingo. But they all felt like destinations. I mean, if I take that analogy of, if I were to go to a language tutor, like I went from having to go to the tutor being with me, but the tutor was still distinctly in a different part of my pocket. This idea of feeling like I have a human with me all the time is like a very different way to think about every application we work with. And
Yeah.
what do they all turn into? I'll end with one last example that I think is very relevant for you as a academic. Uh, academic
Academic is good enough. Yeah.
academic is good enough, but as a professor, and the way I think about it is, if you think about the future of education, so I think education is a really interesting one to think about, because I think YouTube played an interesting role in education. I still remember when I was getting started at YouTube, was right when MIT and Stanford started posting all their lectures online for free.
Right.
And there was this
Right.
moment of crisis in the entire academic community of what the hell is college going to be about if the professor's lectures are available online for free to non-students. Like, what would that actually mean? And it turned out to not at all be the death of colleges. In fact, it probably, colleges really blossomed through it, because it made really clear that the role of college wasn't actually the lecture materials. It was the experience of working with the students, the experience of working with the professors, and so on. I think we're about to see the next level of that. So today, if you're in class, you get an assignment, you go work on it. A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, you hand it in, you get some feedback, you go iterate again, and so on. Imagine that world that the professor, not only could you watch the professor anytime you wanted, imagine the professor watched you anytime they wanted.
Yeah.
Imagine they were actually next to you while you were working. So as you're writing your paper, instead of waiting 3 weeks for feedback, imagine that in every keystroke, your professor could sit next to you and say, I think you're kind of headed the wrong way here. And let's not learn the wrong patterns. Let's learn the right patterns. And just like Duolingo can be that tutor that works with you everywhere, imagine that, people often refer to Grammarly as their high school English teacher with them everywhere. Imagine that was your history professor, your chemistry professor. Imagine it was your business school professor, and they were with you everywhere you were, helping you as you went. What would the future of education look like in that way? So anyway, some agents that exist today, but also some that I think I'm really excited about for the future as well.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, we are already experimenting with some of these things that you mentioned, like the idea that you can take your professor home with you. All the lectures are recorded. You've got the textbook, you've got everything. And then now, when you go home, you can even just ask a question. What was the professor saying about this particular thing? And the AI system has, through RAG and those approaches, has access to everything and can slow things down and give you that feedback, and much more.
Yeah,
I mean, that's an example. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I definitely think the professor in your pocket is a good starting point. The professor in your work, I think, is going to feel like a whole nother jump. And
Yeah.
and I think, maybe if I just focus on Grammarly, obviously is very popular with students and with educational institutions. One of the large educational institutions we work with, they have their writing 101 class is 40,000 students. It's a very big university, and they increase pass rates in that class by multiple percentage points by deploying Grammarly. And this was actually making your writing better. But the idea of having a writing professor work alongside you the way Grammarly does, I'm going to tell you as you go. I think you're doing this. I think you've got this slightly off. Maybe there's a better way to word this. Not only, there's a lot of fear of this is gonna actually remove people's ability to have good, in that case, good spelling, good grammar, but actually find the opposite impact. You actually learn much better when somebody is next to you, coaching you of, here's a better way to do this. Um, and so I think the same thing is going to happen in every discipline. There's a lot to put the lecture notes available to you and the textbooks available to you, and you can go ask a question. But I think for most people, go ask a question isn't the way you collaborate. The way you collaborate is your collaborator is with you. They're working next to you. They're looking over your shoulder. They're helping you before you know you need to ask. And I think that's a dramatic transformation of how every application works, and it'll change everything from education to workplace productivity.
Yeah. Yeah. Shishir, you just walked us through reimagining, say, education, or even reimagining Duolingo. You're currently reimagining Grammarly. So, one question I have for you that I would like to explore is this more general organizational transformation around AI playbook. I see a lot of CEOs, not just in software industry, but very traditional companies and industries as well, thinking about what does AI mean for us? What do we do? And a common thing that I hear from many execs is what's going on is a conversation around what can AI do for us, which feels a bit limiting if you're just starting off with, okay, what can AI do? Let's list it and let's see which ones we want to prioritize. How would you approach this question of business transformation around AI? What's your playbook, or what's your approach for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first off, there's a mindset question of I think that I think clearly the most forward-looking companies in the world today are all saying the net benefits of AI are so high that we need to be on the edge of exploring how it fits in our business. And it's going to fit in every business a little bit differently, in every role a little bit differently. And I think starting with optimism instead of fear is very helpful. And you have to inject that into your teams, because the teams will be afraid in some cases of where this sits, where their job security sits, and so on. And you have to give people confidence that the path of bringing AI into your company is going to, you have to have that optimistic view of this is really, I'm hiring, nobody would refuse headcount. And so you say, I'm giving you 50 more people. It's a very different frame than I'm looking at this software from a job elimination standpoint. So I think that mindset, I think really helps. I do think that there's a set of products out there that are getting fast adoption that are working in very, sometimes very specific ways. And some of them, we see them a lot. I mentioned in the developer tool space, things like what Cursor, Claude Code, so on are doing. There's sort of similar tools in almost every department that are being rolled out. There's a set of them that are working in customer support, a set are working in design, and so on. I think adopting them is very important. I also think there's a fabric that's being laid that allows these tools to work together. And I think, obviously what we're trying to do with Grammarly is be one of those fabric layers. This is the way you can build agents that work with you everywhere across all your tools, understand your knowledge, and also can bring it into your tools. But there's a few others that are important there. So as you go and adopt those point tools, you also need to think about what's that fabric layer. And there's a lot of challenges in that. Obviously one of the biggest ones is how to think about information, trust, security, privacy, so on. I want this fabric layer that can understand. It's only useful if it understands everything in my company, but also that's very, very scary. And so I think being able to do that well is really important. And then finally, I think you have to celebrate the wins. I think finding opportunities to take people's ideas and say, hey, I did this thing, and all of a sudden, here's what changed about our design workflow, or here's what changed about our support workflow, or so. I think you have to find a way to bring that to the forefront. It helps reduce that fear, and it inspires the next idea. So but I think a lot of it starts with mindset, and there is a set of platform choices that I think are very important as well.
It was interesting to hear you talk about things like celebrating when many things around culture, team culture, organization culture, and so on. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about that. I know you've spoken in the past about how organizations build cultural products with unique rituals. And you also have a forthcoming book, I believe, which is on rituals of great teams. Tell us more about that project. What do you mean by rituals, and why do they matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'll give a little bit of history on this topic. So I'm writing a book on this topic, although I sort of paused a bit while I was integrating the companies. I've been restarting now. If people are interested, you can go to ritualsofgreatteams.com and you can get an early look. I've been trying to publish a chapter at a time as they're ready. But my interest in the topic, and I call it, I think obsession is probably the correct word, is it started a few years ago when I was talking with a friend, a guy named Bing Gordon. Bing is now, Bing's famous for, he was one of the senior executives at Electronic Arts and sort of the well-known figure in the gaming industry. But now he's a famous venture capitalist, and the board or advisor of companies like Amazon and Zynga and many others. But anyways, he and I sat on a board together, and he kept harassing the CEO with this question. He said, "What are your golden rituals?" And at some point, we turned to Bing and said, "What's a golden ritual?" Seemed to have something in mind, and he kind of was surprised we asked, and he said, "Oh, I thought everybody knew. Every great company has a small list of golden rituals, and they meet three criteria. So the very clear criteria. The three criteria are: number one, they're named; number two, every employee knows them by their first Friday; and number three, they are templated." And that's it. They're named. Every employee knows them by their first Friday, and they're templated. And he started listing off his examples. Amazon does six pagers. Salesforce does V2 Mom. Google does OKRs. Every great company has a small list of golden rituals. What are yours? And it was a really provocative, interesting question. And then basically over the years, I got really interested in the topic. I started writing about it a bit. People started sending me their thoughts. I started compiling them into a book of just what are some of the best rituals from companies. So at this point, I've interviewed something like 1,000 or so different companies and leaders, picked off the top 100 or so rituals, and I've organized them into this book. So I do think it's really interesting. One story I'll tell about it that was interesting. So I was talking with Dharmesh Shah. Dharmesh is the founder of HubSpot.
HubSpot, yeah.
And he had a great ritual to share with me called flash tags, which I can talk more about if you're interested. But he also was really excited to talk to me about rituals generally. And he gave me this analogy I really liked. He said, as company builders, we actually build two products. We build one product for our customers, and we build another product for our employees. And that second product, we give that product many names. Sometimes probably the closest name we give that product is culture. That's the thing we build for our employees. But if you ask someone to describe culture, they will almost always give their examples. Their actualization of culture is through rituals. They'll talk about the way, hey, we have this particular value, and the way it surfaces in the company is through this ritual. And so in that sense, he said, we spend so much time building the product for our customers. What if we put an equivalent amount of brain power in building the product for our employees? And so that's gotten me very excited about this topic of rituals.
It's super interesting, but just to make things very concrete for our listeners, give me an example of a ritual that you like. Maybe it's the one you mentioned from Dharmesh, or it's something you use at Coda. An example or two of a concrete ritual that is used at companies.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Coda one. So if you were to ask any Coda employee, and nowadays any Grammarly employee, same question, what Coda's golden ritual is, they would almost certainly tell you the same thing. You catch them on their first Friday, they would all tell you our number one ritual is this thing we call Dory and Pulse. Dory and Pulse is actually two rituals that are stapled together, but it's a pretty simple idea. So when you have a meeting at Coda, there'll be a write-up or whatever the description of the topic is, and at the bottom of the page there'll be these two tools, Dory and Pulse. So Dory is the topic voting tool. So that you go in, and instead of everybody blurting out questions in the review, everybody adds their questions to a table and they vote them up and down. And it's a pretty simple idea. It's named after the fish who asked all the questions.
Yeah.
And it's a way to prevent the overtalker. I'm sure everybody's been in a meeting where one person dominates the whole discussion because they're the loudest voice or whatever it might be. This allows you to focus on the topics that are of the most interest to the most people in the room. So that's Dory. The second part of it is called Pulse. And in Pulse, what we ask everyone to do is everybody gets one row and a table, and you write down your answer, your view on the decision being contemplated. And one of the tricks is that we actually hide everybody else until everybody's done writing. And so you come in, and it could be anything. Should we launch this feature? Should we hire this person? Should we buy this company? Should we take on this customer? Whatever it might be. And everybody goes through, and usually there's a scale. I'm supportive or not supportive on a scale of 1 to 5. And you put in your reason, but you do it without without seeing everyone else's answer. And the reason we do that is to remove bias, right? And so, same thing. You go around the room and you say, "Hey, what do you think of this decision?" And person number one says yes. Person number two says yes. Person number three says yes. Person number four, it's very hard for them to say no.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is removing that bias. Now, if you ask any Coda employee about our golden ritual, they'll almost certainly tell you about this, and often with some excitement. But interestingly, most of them are not meeting wonks. They're not that interested in it because of it being a good meeting technique. They're interested in it because it's emblematic of a cultural value. So one of our values at Coda is that great ideas can come from anywhere. And that's something we talk about. And I'll listen to employees, on their first Friday, they're talking to their partner, they're talking to their friend. They say, "I joined this company, Coda, now Grammarly. And they have this value, great ideas can come from anywhere," and they really mean it. And I was just in a meeting, and my question outvoted the CEO's. I don't know why that's a bar for people, but that's something I hear a lot. Or they'll say, "I was in this meeting, and usually I wouldn't even be asked my opinion. In this case, I was not only asked, I was able to describe it very clearly. I was able to write it down. It was clearly read and considered in the decision, and I felt included in a way that I never have in another team or company." And so the point of the ritual, actually, it's a much more efficient way to run a meeting. I'd highly recommend it, even if your only goal is efficiency. But actually, the thing it's doing is highlighting a cultural value and bringing that forefront to your team.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about here. I'm going to think about what rituals I need with my PhD students, for example, and I'm sure our listeners will be thinking about rituals for them as well.
I've seen you with some videos of some rituals that I know you have. So that's some very fun ones, I think. So.
Well, yeah. So I have a dance one at the final day of.
That's what
class.
I was thinking of.
Shishir, before I let you go, maybe one last thing I'd want to do is, since you're into productivity and rituals, I'm going to do a rapid fire productivity confession. So answer in 15 seconds, 2-3 very quick questions for you.
Okay.
So the first one is, what's your silliest or most unproductive workplace habit that you're willing to confess? Like for me, sometimes it's I'll sneak in some YouTube videos while I'm working, and I hate that. I don't readily admit it, but it is one of those for me.
My mind break is the New York Times games. So that's if I find myself, not focused, I'll pick off one of I think their game set is amazing. So I'll pick off one of their games.
Even your unproductive work is somehow, in long term, will help your productivity. So that's telling something about you.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so since you seem to be using these kinds of unproductive habits, now I'm interested in what's a secret productivity routine that you usually don't share with others. Like, is it, maybe taking a call from an unexpected place, or multitasking, or whatever it is, but like something you don't readily admit, but it helps you in some way.
I'll pick one that it's related to Superhuman, but I've done it since long before we bought the company. Actually, interestingly, when we started the discussion on buying the company, they pulled some stats for me on my own usage. So I have a 144 week inbox zero streak, which is 2.5 years of getting to zero inbox. And I give a lot of that credit to Superhuman. Anyone who hasn't tried it, I would highly recommend. If you're anywhere close to an inbox zero thinker, or if you want to be, I would highly recommend it. But the hack was what feature they launched relatively recently that really supercharges for me is called auto labels. And it was a really interesting one where I don't know if you're like this, but I'm an intense Gmail filterer. And I would, over the last 15 years, the last, I guess, 11 years with Coda, I had built up this sequence of filters. By the time the acquisition closed, I had near 800 of these filters. And I was very scared about, I'm going to move my email from Coda.io to Grammarly.com. What the hell am I going to do with all these filters? And so I was sitting down and thinking, oh man, I don't want to recreate 800 of these filters. I'm not even sure they're even relevant. And I sat down and wrote 4 auto labels in Superhuman. And then the way it works is it's a very human-like prompt. So instead of describing, when I get an email from this email address, do this, you say, when I get an email that sounds like this, or is about this topic, then do this. And it turned out that with a very, very small list, I could really take over my email, and it's related to our agentic conversation as well. But just a little bit of higher level instruction. I now hired 20 employees to sort my email for me, and it's a pretty good hack.
Okay, I'll try that as well. And I'll confess, I haven't used Superhuman as much,
We'll
that's
get you started soon.
Yeah, I need to do. This has been fun, Shishir. Thanks so much. I think, in terms of exploring the future of work in a more concrete way and the two kinds of tools and the kinds of agents coming soon, this was a good way to explore that. So thanks again for making the time.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kartik.
Well, that was an interesting conversation. Two big themes emerged from this conversation for me. The first is around how do we play defense and offense around AI? AI can feel threatening to many organizations. In fact, 2 years ago, people talked about how ChatGPT and LLMs could be a Grammarly killer. And Shishir mentioned how instead they have noticed that LLMs have had no meaningful impact on Grammarly's usage. But the more interesting thing he mentioned is around how AI is an opportunity to reshape the vision of an organization. He's in fact developed a grander vision for Grammarly. And that vision is around how they can become a productivity suite for individuals built around AI, built around agents as well. And Grammarly is the OG product around which they're building this vision. And so I think there is much to take away here for all leaders in organizations about how you can also think about a new vision with AI as the new entry into the market. What is the new vision now that we have AI available to us? The other theme from the conversation is around the framing of human agent workflows and human agent workplaces. Everyone, including entry-level workers or recent college graduates, can now have a team of 50 AI workers or AI agents available to them. It's an opportunity to reimagine work. And it begs the question of which tools or which AI workers are you going to hire? Shishir mentioned a few. He talked about Grammarly for language or Superhuman for email. And outside of their ecosystem, he talked about things like Claude Code or Cursor or Replit for software development. All of us could ask, given the wealth of AI tools and agentic tools that are emerging, which workers do I want to hire right now to support and enhance my own work and increase my productivity? So I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Please feel free to share those comments on this platform or on social media. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Thanks again, and we'll see you the next episode.